Ever feel like the word expert, well, it feels like these days it's thrown around,
Yeah,
like pretty loosely.
yeah.
We hear expert everywhere. So today we're doing a deep dive into that, the idea of expertise, you know, but with a little twist.
Yeah.
We're going like all the way back
Okay.
to ancient Greece
Wow, okay.
to see what those philosophers, what they had to say about someone being an expert.
It's so interesting how relevant that still is, these ancient ideas.
Right.
Yeah. And we're tackling this using excerpts from John M. Cooper's Reason and Emotion,
Okay.
which dives into Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, but in a way that I think will challenge our assumptions.
Oh, interesting, because you think like Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, those guys were the experts of their time, right?
Right.
But I have a feeling it's a bit more nuanced than that, right?
Exactly.
So what's our mission for this deep dive?
So the goal is to, I guess, untangle how these philosophers viewed expertise, and especially in ethics and politics, which, are things that we're still debating today.
Right.
And we'll look at their core arguments and really try to get at what's unique
Okay.
about each of their perspectives.
Okay, so let's unpack this. And I think a good place to start is with Socrates.
Okay.
He's the OG, right?
Yeah.
He's the guy, he's like he's famous for saying he knew nothing, which
Yeah.
is so ironic
Right.
because he's Socrates.
Right, exactly. And to add to that, I think what's interesting here is that there were multiple Socrates.
Really?
Yeah, circulating in the ancient texts.
Oh, wow.
And Cooper really highlights this contrast between Xenophon's Socrates
Correct.
versus Plato's Socrates.
Wait, hold on. Two different versions of the same guy.
Yeah.
Okay, tell me more about this.
Yeah, so Xenophon presents Socrates as kind of this champion of traditional values, someone who emphasized self-control, piety, these sorts of things, almost like a model citizen, advocating for a moral code that was, widely accepted.
Okay, so the kind of like the wise old sage
Exactly.
dispensing these timeless bits of wisdom.
Exactly.
Okay.
But Plato's Socrates, he's a bit more rebellious.
Okay.
He's constantly challenging conventional thinking, poking holes in accepted beliefs, really kind of pushing the boundaries
Okay.
of what people consider to be truth.
I think I like him better already.
Yeah.
He sounds like my kind of guy.
Right.
So how does that then play into the idea of expertise, though?
That's the heart of it.
Okay.
Because for Socrates, true expertise, no matter what the field was,
Okay.
hinged on this crucial element, knowledge of justice and the good. It's not enough to just be skilled in something.
Okay.
You actually need that moral compass.
So are you saying, like, to be, I don't know, a great doctor or a brilliant mathematician, you also have to be, like, an ethical person?
That's the question.
Like, your moral code is somehow intertwined with your actual abilities.
Yeah, that's the question that Socrates forces us to confront. Can you separate someone's, technical skills from their moral compass? Can true expertise exist without that ethical foundation?
Oh, that's a good question. That's really interesting. And I'm guessing this gets even more complex when we look at how these two versions of Socrates viewed relationships between men and boys, which sadly was considered like a socially acceptable thing back then.
It's a difficult topic, but it's in the source material, and it's really important to understanding their different approaches to ethics.
Okay.
So Xenophon, he portrays Socrates' relationship with young men as purely mentorship, so focused on, guidance and instruction.
Okay.
There's no physical aspect to it whatsoever.
Okay. What about Plato Socrates? He usually has the more kind of, the more radical viewpoint.
Right, and so this is where it gets interesting, because Plato Socrates actually goes on this, kind of deeper level of analysis, and he talks about heavenly love versus earthly love.
Okay.
Implying that even our desires, even in these kind of, complex situations, need to be aligned with a higher moral purpose.
Okay.
That true knowledge, true expertise requires us to actually examine our motivations, our desires, through an ethical lens.
So we've got these two, kind of contrasting versions of Socrates,
Right.
One very traditional values and the other one challenging norms, really kind of getting into these, complexities, these ethical complexities of desire even.
Yeah.
But what about Plato?
Right.
how does he, as like his own philosophical heavyweight,
Exactly.
how does he approach this idea of expertise?
Well, so Plato takes these ideas from Socrates and kind of develops them in his own way.
Okay.
And he really argues that true expertise isn't just about having these, technical skills or even the ability to persuade. It runs much deeper than that.
Oh.
For Plato, it's all about possessing genuine knowledge and especially moral knowledge.
Okay.
It's about aligning your actions with this deep understanding of what is truly good and just.
Okay. I mean, that sounds very profound, but like, how does that actually play out, like, in his work?
Yeah.
Can you give me like a concrete example?
Absolutely. So one of his most famous dialogues, the Gorgias,
Okay.
really kind of illustrates this point perfectly.
Okay.
And so, Gorgias, who's this renowned orator,
Right.
he very confidently claims that his art, oratory, it's all about persuading people on matters of justice and injustice.
Okay.
So basically, like, I can teach you to be convincing about even right and wrong.
So he's implying that, like, he holds the key to winning these arguments, like swaying people to his side, even if it means, like, bending some of these moral boundaries.
Precisely.
Okay.
And Socrates, being Socrates, kind of sets this clever trap. And through his questioning, he leads Gorgias down this path of reasoning that exposes this potential flaw,
Okay.
which is, can you really be an expert at teaching oratory without actually understanding and teaching what is truly just and unjust?
Ooh.
Right.
So to be a true expert at oratory, you can't just be like a wordsmith.
Right.
You have to actually have a deep understanding of justice itself.
Exactly.
Persuasion without that moral compass is just manipulation.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so that's a key point for both Socrates and Plato here, right?
Yeah.
Expertise runs deeper
Okay.
than just skills.
Okay.
It requires that foundation of moral knowledge, or else you risk using those abilities for unethical purposes.
Well, right. Persuading people without regard for what's right, truly.
Exactly.
So knowledge without ethics is a dangerous thing.
Right. And Plato doesn't stop there.
Oh, no.
He actually goes on to criticize what he sees as conventional political expertise,
Yeah.
which he thinks often misses the mark.
Okay, what does he mean by that? Like, isn't political expertise like governing effectively, making tough decisions?
Well, for Plato, the problem is that a lot of what passes for political expertise is actually just flattery and manipulation
Uh-huh.
that's aimed at pleasing the masses and maintaining power rather than leading them towards, true justice and what's genuinely good.
So, according to Plato, we should be wary of leaders who just tell us what we want to hear, who prioritize like popularity over ethical leadership.
Exactly. We should be seeking leaders who demonstrate that deep understanding of justice,
Okay.
who are driven by the good, and who are courageous enough to challenge conventional wisdom in pursuit of truth.
That's pretty high standard for our leaders.
Right.
But it makes you wonder, like, are those, like, true philosophical, ethical underpinnings, are those missing from a lot of modern day politics?
That's a question worth pondering.
Yeah.
And speaking of pondering, let's shift our focus over to Aristotle. How does he, as a student of Plato, how does he contribute to this conversation?
Okay, so we've tackled Socrates
Right.
and his like two different sides, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And then we dove into Plato's world
Right.
of ideal forms, moral knowledge.
Yeah.
But where does Aristotle fit into all of this? He was Plato's student.
Yeah, that's right.
So did he just kind of like, follow in his teacher's footsteps
Yeah.
when it comes to like this idea of expertise?
Not exactly. So Aristotle, while he was obviously deeply influenced by Plato, he brought his own unique kind of perspective to the table.
Okay.
And like his predecessors, he saw this strong connection between expertise and virtue, but he shifted the emphasis a little bit
Okay.
to a more practical realm.
Okay.
So for Aristotle, it wasn't enough to just know what was virtuous, right?
Right.
True expertise was actually in the ability to act virtuously.
Okay, so it's not just about like, having your head filled with all this like knowledge about ethics.
Yeah.
You got to actually like, it has to shape your behavior, your choices.
Right.
Walk the walk, not just talk the talk.
Exactly. He was all about the practical application of knowledge, especially in areas like politics and ethics,
Okay.
where action, decision-making, those are paramount.
Right.
And he emphasizes the importance of developing what he calls phronesis,
Phronesis.
which is practical wisdom.
Practical wisdom. Okay, that sounds pretty essential for like navigating life, especially, if you're in a position of leadership or something.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He thought phronesis was essential for anyone who wants to live a good and flourishing life,
Right.
but especially, like you said, for those in positions of authority.
Right.
And this is where another one of his key concepts comes in, which is the what he calls the unity of virtue.
The unity of virtue. Okay, now you're just using big words to make my head spin.
Right.
Break it down for me. What does that even mean?
So it's simpler than it sounds.
Okay, good.
Basically, Aristotle believed that you can't possess one virtue in isolation.
Okay.
Right? So, for example, you can't be truly just without also possessing other virtues like courage, temperance, wisdom.
Okay.
They're all interconnected.
Okay.
And they work together to create this kind of harmonious and virtuous character.
So you can't just be like a justice warrior.
Right.
Without also like, cultivating self-control.
Right.
Courage, the wisdom to make like sound judgments.
Exactly.
Like it's like threads in a tapestry. They're all intertwined to create this like, this complete virtuous whole.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah.
And it highlights how, for Aristotle, expertise, especially in these realms like politics, ethics, requires this well-rounded and virtuous character.
Okay.
It's about developing all aspects of your moral compass.
Right.
So that your actions are consistently aligned with the good.
Okay, so we've gone from Socrates, who challenged us to like question everything, seek this ethical knowledge, then Plato, with his moral knowledge, true justice. And now we have Aristotle, who's kind of bringing it down to earth.
Right.
Like practical wisdom, the unity of all these virtues. It's like we're building this like philosophical pyramid of expertise.
That's a great way to think about it.
Right.
And as we reach kind of like the pinnacle of our philosophical pyramid here, we have to at least touch upon the Stoics.
Okay.
Because they took this link between virtue and knowledge to a whole other level.
The Stoics, those were the hardcore guys.
Yeah.
Those were the guys who were all about like, embracing hardship, keeping a stiff upper lip no matter what life throws your way.
Yeah, so that's a bit of an oversimplification.
Okay.
But they did emphasize self-control and resilience
Right.
in the face of adversity. But when it comes to expertise, the Stoics went even further than Socrates, Plato, Aristotle.
Okay.
They argued that virtue is knowledge. So, in their view, if you truly understand what is good, you will automatically act in accordance with that understanding.
Wow, so they're like even more demanding than the others. There's no like room for like moral slip-ups.
Yeah.
Or inconsistencies if you like truly possess virtue according to the Stoics.
Right.
So how does that play out then when we're talking about expertise?
It raises this really interesting question for us today,
Okay.
especially in our age of, hyper-specialization.
Right.
Can we truly be experts in these isolated fields
Right.
without understanding the interconnectedness of all knowledge?
Right. So it's like they're saying that true knowledge can't be like put into a box.
Right.
It can't be compartmentalized. That to be a true expert in anything, you kind of need this like holistic understanding of, the universe and our place in it.
Exactly.
Wow, that's pretty intense.
That's a radical idea.
Yeah, even today, it's still a radical idea. Well, this has been quite a deep dive. My goodness, we've gone from like doubting expertise to like, redefining it thanks to like, these ancient Greek philosophers from, thousands of years ago.
Yeah.
What a journey. So as we kind of wrap things up here, like what's the final thought you want to leave with our listeners?
Yeah, so as you encounter, as we all do, experts in our lives, doctors, lawyers, politicians, even podcast hosts, remember the wisdom of Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. Yes, even the Stoics. Don't just take their word for it. Ask questions, challenge assumptions, and really look for those who embody not just knowledge and skill, but also that wisdom, that virtue, that deep understanding of what it means to actually live a good and ethical life.
Right. Because true expertise, as we've been saying, it's so much more than just like being really good at something.
Exactly.
Or knowing a lot about something.
Exactly.
It's about aligning like our knowledge with our actions, our skills with our values, and ultimately, striving to live a life that's worthy of that title of expert in the art of living.
Well said.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
It was a pleasure being here.
And thank you, listeners, for coming along for the ride.